Hello everyone, this is Nathan Peeplow here to talk about the spell of data visualization and how to cast it, or Data Viz as the cool kids call it. Today we're going to talk briefly about what Data Viz can do, and then I'm going to show you 6 basic principles of good data design. We're going to look at both good and bad examples of Data Viz on our way to making you into competent creators of data visualizations and critical consumers of them. So, what can Data Viz do? Many things, but we're going to focus on 3. It can create new knowledge, it can change minds, and it can generate interaction. For powerful examples of these 3 things, we're going to look at 3 classic moments from the history of Data Viz. First one, a very famous map from 1854. John Snow was a doctor in London when cholera broke out. At the time, most people thought cholera was spread by miasma, which means bad air, the stink of the open sewers. John Snow was skeptical. He went to the affected neighborhood and he knocked on each door and asked, "How many people have died at this address in the last 2 weeks?" On the map, he drew a black bar behind each door for each person who had died. So for example, here, 2 people died at this address, 3 people died at this address, a whole bunch of people died at this address. And when he created this map, he was able to see a pattern. The closer you lived to the Broad Street water pump, the more likely you were to be dead. So John Snow went to the authorities and he said, "I think cholera is waterborne, and I think the Broad Street water pump is the source of the infection." The authorities removed the handle from the Broad Street pump, and the cholera outbreak stopped. This was a key moment in data visualization history because it marked one of the first times that data visualization created knowledge. John Snow didn't see the pattern in his data until he visualized it. This is one of the great things that Data Viz can do. It can teach us about our own data. Unfortunately, this was not a key moment in medical history because this was real life and not a movie. So as soon as this cholera outbreak was over, of course, everybody went back to believing that cholera was spread by miasma, and John Snow died a few years later completely forgotten. Only a generation later, after the germ theory of disease became understood, did researchers dig up Snow's old publications and recognize him as the father of the science we now call epidemiology. Here's our second great moment in the history of data visualization. These charts were created by Florence Nightingale, who became famous as a nurse tending to British soldiers during the Crimean War. You may recall the Crimean War was the one with the charge of the Light Brigade, commemorated in Tennyson's famous poem, "Theirs not to reason why, theirs but to do and die. Into the valley of death rode the 600. That's the war we're talking about. But Florence Nightingale wasn't just a nurse. She was also a statistician. In fact, she was the first female member of Britain's Royal Statistical Society. After the Crimean War, Florence Nightingale came back to Britain and created this data visualization. It's a type of chart she invented called a polar area diagram. Each of these 2 roses represents 1 year of the war, and they go clockwise through 12 months. So the chart starts here in April 1854, goes for 1 year around, and then jumps over here, and here's 1855. This is the 2nd year of the war. In each month, red indicates the number of soldiers who died in battle or from wounds sustained in battle. This blue-gray color represents those who died from infectious disease. Black represents all other causes of death combined. Once you know that, one big takeaway should strike you right away, which is that infectious disease killed far more British soldiers in Crimea than the Russian army did. The second thing you should notice is that there's a big difference between the first year of the war and the 2nd year of the war. Far fewer soldiers died in the 2nd year, especially from disease. So, what happened in March 1855? That's when the British government sent the Sanitary Commission to Crimea to clean up the field hospitals. The result? A dramatic reduction in disease in the last year of the war. When Nightingale came home to Britain, she realized that this knowledge needed to revolutionize society. So she wrote up this 500-page report full of data visualizations like the one you just saw, and sent it to Queen Victoria and to Parliament. She was trying to convince them to spend the money to make the Sanitary Commission into a full-time thing. She said, we need to be doing this on the home front, not just on foreign battlefields. Her argument was successful. Sanitation reforms were adopted, and they are credited with increasing the average life expectancy in Britain and India by 20 years. This is one of the first great examples of data viz changing minds. Our third example comes from the 1900 Paris exhibition, or World's Fair. An enormous temporary pavilion was constructed that attracted 50 million visitors during its 7-month run. 40 nations were invited to set up exhibits of their technology and culture. Part of the United States exhibit was dedicated to the experience of African Americans and was designed by famous black scholar and civil rights activist W.E.B. Du Bois. This is Du Bois here on the left, and this is his exhibit on the right. It was a little room that people could walk into. He and his students were given just 4 months and limited funding to create the entire exhibit from scratch. One centerpiece of the exhibit was a series of over 30 data visualizations intended to reverse American and European stereotypes about people of African descent. Here is the first data visualization that many attendees saw. It's remarkable in several ways. First of all, it contains an enormous amount of information all at once, and so it's an early example of what we now call an infographic. Second, it seeks to counter the common stereotype that black people are poor, and it does that not just by presenting the data, but it also humanizes the people with pasted portraits and photographs of their houses. And it takes great care to show them striving for what Du Bois called the higher life. Religion, art, education, books, papers, travel. Coolest of all, look at the bottom. Down there it says, for further statistics, raise this frame. This viz was 22 by 27 inches on cardboard, and it was the top image in a whole stack of vizes that attendees were encouraged to flip through. Data visualization specialist Jason Forrest has called this perhaps the first interactive prompt. This is an early example of data viz that makes you interact with it, that pulls the viewer in and gets them exploring the data on their own. This is the power of data viz. So there you have 3 classic examples from history of how data viz can create knowledge, change minds, and generate interaction. And by the way, that multicolored spiral on the right side of the screen is another one of the data visualizations created by W.E.B. Du Bois for the Paris exhibition. It's actually a stacked bar chart in an unconventional shape. The 3 colors at the top show the percentage of the black population that lived in cities at that time. The red shows the proportion of them that lived in rural areas, much larger proportion. Instead of simply making a really long bar, he created this striking shape to catch the eye and to better fit the data on the page. Ever since, it's become an iconic image. Thanks for watching.